It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And this is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Welcome to my listeners here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And remember, you can download the iHeartRadio app and listen to the show wherever you are, whenever you like. If you'd like to listen to prior podcasts of the show, read my bi-weekly columns on Penn Live, or to take a look at some great merchandise we have, check out our website at themarcscaringishow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to The Marc Scaringi Show on YouTube, and you can also follow us on @MarcScaringi or on Facebook, and we try to respond to some of your tweets and comments, and we try to do it live if we can. And welcome to my listeners and friends on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, as always. And it's Father's Day weekend, so happy Father's Day to all the great fathers out there for all the work you do, taking care of your family. For today's show, we'll do a review of one of the top political and legal news stories of the week. As always, it involves President Trump and the Russia-Trump campaign collusion hoax. It lives again. It never seems to die or go away. President Trump's interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos has sent the media all aflutter once again over the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Stephanopoulos, now a lauded journalist, and I should say journalist in quotes. Of course, he's a former political operative and later White House spokesperson for former President Bill Clinton. He's a lifelong liberal Democrat and friend, supporter, and advocate for all things Clinton and all things Democrat. Now he is supposed to be a respected journalist. In any event, the White House gave Stephanopoulos unprecedented access to President Trump. Why? Well, God only knows. It's beyond me why the White House would permit such an obvious partisan posing as a journalist to interview the president. Yet it happens again and again. And, of course, there's big fallout from this interview. Now, before we get to the interview, I want to just take you back to 13 days before the 2016 presidential election, when then candidate Trump gave a long interview again to George Stephanopoulos. And I took a look at this early interview before Trump became president during the most important final stage, the last 13 days of his presidential campaign. And I examined the interview, and George Stephanopoulos' first question back then, here it is. So 13 days to go. How do you pull this out? So the question from this purportedly unbiased, nonpartisan, quote, journalist, end quote, really assumes that Trump's losing the race, and it immediately puts Trump on the defensive. So Trump has to defend his chances of winning the election. Trump says the polls indicate he's leading in Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. And Stephanopoulos quickly tries to interject and correct Trump by saying, well, that's just the Bloomberg poll. All the polls in Florida and North Carolina show Hillary Clinton ahead. Now, remember, Stephanopoulos used to work for Bill and Hillary Clinton on Bill's campaign and in the White House. So pause for a moment. Who turned out to be right? Stephanopoulos says Hillary's winning Florida and North Carolina. Trump said he's winning Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. Who turned out to be right? Who won Florida? Who won North Carolina? And who won Ohio? Trump did, as he predicted, and as yours truly predicted as well. So that's the first question and the first exchange. Stephanopoulos assumes Trump's losing, tries to correct Trump, and and essentially is saying Trump is not accurately reporting on the polling, that the polling has Hillary winning. Turns out Trump was right on the polling and right on who's winning and was not losing. But that's the way the liberal journalist starts the interview. Now, Stephanopoulos' second question. Again, we're going back to the big interview between Stephanopoulos and then candidate Donald J. Trump 13 days before the 2016 presidential election as a little backstory and context for the big interview that just occurred the other day that has set the national media all aflutter, this time over the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Anyway, Stephanopoulos' second question, and you have to YouTube this interview. It's on YouTube, the video. Stephanopoulos asks the second question in a tone of kind of condescension and slight arrogance and surprise. Stephanopoulos asks, "So you're not behind?" No, George, he wasn't. He wasn't behind. He was winning, and he won. But yet the interviewer assumes that all enlightened, intelligent people believe correctly that Hillary Clinton is winning and will win, but that's false. So the second question has Trump on the defensive and actually challenges the accuracy of Trump's early first answer, which is that he's winning. By the way, this entire exchange involving Trump and Stephanopoulos, Trump is repeatedly explaining to young George Stephanopoulos that he's winning because he's drawing massive crowds and Hillary wasn't. Stephanopoulos, a typical D.C. Beltway insider, just kind of rejected that analysis, rejected the recitation of the facts, which is Trump saying, "I'm drawing crowds of 20,000 people a pop wherever I go, George. Isn't that a pretty good sign that I'm winning the race when Hillary gets a couple of hundred here and there and then goes to sleep for a day or two before her next pseudo rally?" So there's Trump, not a politician by any stretch of the imagination, never involved in politics before, explaining to the pseudo journalist who spent his entire life in politics, in campaigns and elections as a campaign aide. And Trump is explaining, George, if I'm getting all the crowds and Hillary's not, that's a pretty good sign that I'm winning. No, Stephanopoulos not impressed, doesn't accept the analysis. It reminds me of an argument that I got into with a fellow campaign staffer back in 1994 when I was a young campaign aide on the campaign of a young Rick Santorum when he was first running for the United States Senate. And we were both working on the campaign, and my colleague, he was very smart, and it turns out he was a closet liberal because he's recently come out as a full-on Beto fan. But anyway, back then, we were talking about what we needed to do to win the election, and he was insistent that we need to go on the air, TV commercials. That's how you win. And of course, Hillary Clinton had the televisions covered wall to wall with commercials here, and every 30 seconds there was a Hillary Clinton television commercial. I was explaining that the way we need to win the campaign is to win on the ground, meaning getting the candidate out to connect with the voters, getting to the voters, and getting the voters to the polls. Because television commercials don't vote. Voters vote. But this argument is lost on the inside D.C. Beltway crowd. They despise actually going out to a political event. They despise going out to these rallies. They don't like to mix and mingle with the voters. They feel much safer and much better in their well-ensconced, air-conditioned offices in the D.C. Beltway. They like liberals, like TV commercials, polls, the media, talking heads, punditry, everything else that's really just kind of fake. It's conservatives. They like the people. They like actual voters, meeting actual voters. So Trump, who's richer than the entire liberal elite D.C. Beltway class put together, he likes to be with the people, and he knows that the people, the voters, is how you win elections. So Trump, it went to the people. And it's amusing to see George Stephanopoulos acting incredulous that Trump could win and was citing polls showing Hillary leading. And there's Trump, a political neophyte, explaining to a lifelong political operative and pundit The way to win elections, well, it's to get votes from the voters. And Trump talks about crowd size, and he talked about crowd size repeatedly during that interview 13 days prior to the 2016 presidential election. Yet the liberal political expert just didn't get it. Stephanopoulos wasn't buying it. Who cares about crowd size, Stephanopoulos was essentially saying. And the liberals in the media, they say, well, Trump's bragging when he talks about crowd size. No, he's not bragging. He's simply trying to explain to you why he'll win, that he's getting more supporters, more voters. And these liberal pollsters and pundits, they just didn't get it, and they don't get it. Size does matter at the ballot box. Anyway, the third question Stephanopoulos asked was basically a criticism of Trump taking the time off the campaign trail to cut the ribbon at Trump International Hotel just 13 days from Election Day. Now, in retrospect, who remembers that question? I mean, what a silly, inane, inconsequential question. Who cares that Trump took 1 hour to cut the ribbon at his new hotel, which, by the way, drew massive press coverage and gave him an opportunity to repeatedly brag, under budget, ahead of schedule, that's what you want in a president. I could go on about that interview, but those are just the first three questions showing the bias and the ignorance of the questioner, liberal George Stephanopoulos. More about the big ABC News Stephanopoulos interview with Donald Trump in the White House of a few days ago. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And thank you once again for suffering through all of those Scaringi Law commercials. Maybe at some point my crack marketing team will line up some advertisers to advertise on the show. If you'd like to, you can call the law office 717-657-7770. And we'll hook you up with our advertising team, and you can advertise your business here on the Marc Scaringi Show. We're talking about the big interview between George Stephanopoulos of ABC News and Donald Trump. It took over 2 days, and Stephanopoulos got really unfettered access, almost unlimited access to the president over those 2 days. And the president said a few things during the interview that has created quite a media storm. And I'm giving a little background on the first big interview that Stephanopoulos and Trump had back in 2016, 13 days before the election, just showing the bias of the interviewer, Stephanopoulos, a former political hack for all things Clinton, now a pseudo-journalist. But you have to ask yourself, why does Trump take these interviews from former Democratic political operatives, particularly those who work for and worship those running against Trump? Well, fast forward to just a few days ago. Over 2 days, Stephanopoulos interviewed the president. At one point in the Oval Office, Stephanopoulos referenced Donald Trump Jr. testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee once again. Trump defended his son, as he always does, defended his innocence, that he did nothing wrong, and Trump is, of course, correct. Donald Trump Jr. broke no law. Special counsel Bob Mueller, by the way, did not find evidence that Donald Trump Jr. committed any crime in taking that meeting with the Russian attorney at Trump Tower that has generated probably a few million news articles from the liberal media trying to portray this as a criminal episode between Trump Jr. and the Russians. Not so, says Special Counsel Bob Mueller. But in any event, these are the questions that Stephanopoulos is asking President Trump. It's mind-boggling. Trump should have thrown Stephanopoulos out of the Oval Office. In any event, Stephanopoulos followed up and asked the president, should Don Jr. have gone to the FBI when he got that email? Now, he got the email in 2016. It's 2019. We've had 3 years of investigations from Senate committees, House committees, the FBI, the special counsel. Donald Trump Jr. was not charged with any crime. But yet, if you have Stephanopoulos, the ABC News director, interviewing the president, of course, that's what he's going to talk to him about. Donald Trump Jr. and the Trump Tower meeting. Anyway, so Stephanopoulos says, should Donald Trump Jr., should he have gone to the FBI when he got that email? Now, the email referenced is the one from this Rob Goldstone relaying something about a Russian prosecutor saying to Goldstone's father, see how tenuous this is, the Russian prosecutor offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents, and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia. It would be very useful to your father. That's the text of the email. It's part of the Russian government's support for Mr. Trump. Now, that's, again, the email from Goldstone. And Trump Jr. Basically, or the president in the Oval Office basically says that no one would call the FBI in that situation. That's not the way it works. Stephanopoulos says, well, the FBI director said that someone should call the FBI in that situation. And the Trump and the president has now famously said, well, the FBI director is wrong. So who's right and who's wrong? Should Donald Trump Jr. have contacted the FBI when he received that email? Now, from a legal standpoint, no candidate is required to contact the FBI if he's approached by a foreign national offering dirt on his opponent. That's just not the way the law works. So if Stephanopoulos was implying Don Jr. had a legal duty in that case to report Goldstone to the FBI, Stephanopoulos is wrong in his legal analysis. So then Stephanopoulos goes into this hypothetical, and no politician should answer a hypothetical question. Just like when we're in court at trial, we don't allow opposing counsel to ask hypothetical questions. We're not here about something hypothetical. We're here about the facts in the case before the judge, or in this case, before special counsel Mueller or the American people. So don't get into hypotheticals. But anyway, Stephanopoulos does. And Stephanopoulos asks, your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it? Or should they call the FBI? And Trump says, well, maybe you do both. He says, maybe you want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. Trump said, I think I like to hear it. And it's not interference in our election. I think I'd take it. Now, the liberal Democrats all say that if a foreign national pulls you aside, you're working on a campaign, and whispers in your ear something like Joe Biden is having an affair, that is somehow interfering in our election. Of course it's not interfering in election. It's just spreading gossip and innuendo, which happens all over the world, all of the time. And whenever you're on a political campaign, people pull you aside all day long wherever you go and say, hey, did you hear this about your opponent? So this is just the everyday practicality of running a campaign or being involved in a campaign. Anyway, the president continued and said, if I thought there was something wrong, well, I'd go maybe to the FBI. Trump then said the FBI, well, they don't have enough agents to respond to every call that someone makes about opposition research. And see, the problem is Trump's talking about opposition research generally from any source. Yet Stephanopoulos, who went there with an agenda, he's trying to zero in on opposition research provided by a foreign national, and obviously there's a big difference. Now, President Trump, who's always game, gave a frank and honest answer to the obviously biased, silly, and inconsequential questions posed by Stephanopoulos. But again, the problem seems to be that the president's talking about opposition research generally, whereas Stephanopoulos is really zeroing in on oppo research provided by the foreign national. Now, let's take a quick look at what the law says. And I apologize if we get bogged down a little bit on the law, and Art will give me some hand gestures if I'm running up against the next commercial break. But here's what the law says, because this is being debated all over every news channel today. Did the president admit that he would commit a crime with regard to opposition research provided by a foreign national? Now, here's what the law says. It shall be unlawful for a foreign national to make a contribution or donation of money or other thing of value in connection with a federal, state, or local election. So first, we know that a foreign national is prohibited from making a contribution, donation, or other thing of value in an election. And also, by the way, a person is prohibited from soliciting, accepting, or receiving a contribution or donation. That's in the same statute. The statute does not include thing of value in the prohibition that applies to the recipient. So we're not really sure if one is prohibited by law from accepting or receiving a thing of value. It's just the way the statute is written, it's not clear. It's vague. Now, to be on the safe side, one could reasonably conclude that it does. But that's a problem in the statute. And second, naturally, neither the statute or the regulations define thing of value. Wouldn't that be helpful for those trying to run a campaign and comply with federal election law at the same time if the statute or the regs would define, well, what the heck is a thing of value? Again, you're working on the campaign. Someone, I guess maybe who looks foreign or you should know is foreign, whispers in your ear, hey, your opponent's having an affair with his wife. Did you accept that? Did you receive it into your ear, into your brain? Is that little piece of gossip a thing of value? If it is, you're going to jail. I mean, that's I'm exaggerating a bit here, but that's kind of the absurdity of this Federal Election Campaign Act statute that is in play, that the liberal media and Democrats and Stephanopoulos seem to think that President Trump just admitted that he would commit a crime or crimes in his next election. It would be nice if our lawmakers and regulators would actually take the time to make their laws and regulations understandable to those governed by them. In any event, the example, if you're working on a federal election campaign, you meet a guy in a bar, and he says, I'm a foreigner, and your opponent cheats on his wife, by listening to his statement, have you accepted the thing of value? And we just talked about that, and we don't know. We don't know. What if he sends you a text message from the lover of your opponent talking about the affair? Is that a crime? Is the text message a thing of value? Again, neither the statute nor the regulations say. So it's not entirely clear whether there exists a prohibition on accepting a thing of value from a foreign national, even assuming the information that puts the opponent in a bad light is a thing of value. Is information about your opponent having an affair a thing of value? Who knows? The phrase is pretty darn vague. Now, the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, they have put out advice. And they've advised that a foreign national, by the way, may attend, speak at campaign events for a federal candidate, and even solicit contributions to the campaign. Now, that's the FEC. That means federal election law expressly permits someone like Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, to come to the United States and speak at a Trump rally in favor of re-electing Donald Trump, and that is not a federal campaign violation, as long as the Trump campaign doesn't pay the Russian president for his service. The Russian president can even encourage those at the rally to send money and make a political donation to the Trump re-election campaign. And the FEC expressly permits the foreign national, in this case President Vladimir Putin, to solicit contributions to the Trump campaign. So why can't he also solicit, as long as he's not being paid for his services, opposition research? It would appear he could. And that's the nexus of where we are in this great debate in our land today about whether or not George Stephanopoulos just nailed President Trump in admitting that he would commit a crime by receiving and accepting information from a foreign national in his next election. More about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show. Scaringi Law has been providing high-quality legal services to individuals, families, and businesses throughout central Pennsylvania since 2005. Our team of attorneys have over 200 years of combined experience. We have the depth and breadth of expertise that can get the results you need. We're a full-service law firm that brings big firm resources right to your town.
Let's get back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And rest assured, the President of the United States, President Trump, is putting America first just about every day of his administration to date. We're talking about the big kerfluffle that occurred as a result of the president's interview by George Stephanopoulos in the White House, in the Oval Office to be particular, that occurred just a day or two ago. The national media is in hysterics, stating that the president admitted that he would commit a future campaign violation by receiving and accepting information from foreign nationals about any rival in his future campaign. And the president, not sure why the White House communications department permits former political hacks like George Stephanopoulos posing as journalists to interview the president. The Stephanopoulos obviously has a real bias against Trump, against Republicans. Stephanopoulos, former campaign aide for Bill Clinton, spokesperson of the White House for President Bill Clinton, big supporter and advocate of Hillary Clinton. Yet here he is interviewing the president, asking him these extremely intricate hypothetical questions designed to elicit an incriminating response from the president. One's definition of incriminating depends upon one's interpretation of a vague, opaque statute, the Federal Election Campaign Act. And we're just going through some of the provisions of the statute that is in question here. And kind of the absurdity of the statute in that the FEC states that a foreign national can come to America, attend and speak at and participate in political rallies, can even encourage others to donate to political campaigns. So one might think that this same foreign national could also provide opposition research or information, whatever that means, or hints or innuendo, and that would not be a crime. And interestingly, the same law that we're discussing expressly allows foreign nationals to volunteer personal services to a federal candidate, as long as the individual performing the service is not compensated by anyone. So what if the personal service being performed by the foreign national is opposition research, and he's performing this service gratis? It would appear that's not prohibited. And you know, we've gone through the analogy of the Russian president actually permitted to come to America, attend a Trump rally, speak on behalf of President Trump, encourage Americans to vote for President Trump, encourage Americans to donate to the Trump campaign, and that is all expressly permitted by federal election law, according to the FEC. And by the way, to all those candidates and campaign workers and foreign nationals listening out there to the Marc Scaringi Show, I'm not giving legal advice on your particular circumstance. I'm merely commenting generally on the law. So don't come to me in handcuffs saying that I told you could accept information from a foreign national. The best advice, it appears, is not to allow foreign nationals to have any involvement in your campaign whatsoever, so that way you won't end up being entrapped or set up by these extremely opaque, vague, and complex federal election laws and won't get yourself in a jam. Now, the one thing we know for sure is when Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee paid a foreign national, Christopher Steele, to provide opposition research. Now, if opposition research is considered a thing of value, then Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee, well, they're guilty of a felony for violating federal campaign law, because you cannot pay a foreign national to provide a thing of value to an election campaign. That's an express violation of the law. That's exactly what Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee did in paying a foreign national, millions of dollars, by the way, to provide information, opposition research about her opponent, damaging to her opponent during the federal. It doesn't even need to be damaging to the opponent. It's just a thing of value, whatever the heck that means. I can think of lots of definitions for a thing of value. Some things that have value, you think have value, actually don't. In this case, the opposition research that Hillary Clinton paid a foreign agent for, which is an express violation of federal election law, apparently didn't have much value. It was kind of rejected by the voters when it leaked out prior to Election Day. It had, I guess, in another sense, it had great value to her and to the never-Trumpers and the deep state in the Obama Justice Department, because they used it to obtain those FISA warrants to continue their illegal spying and surveillance operation and to jumpstart their fake investigation of alleged but non-existent collusion between Trump and Russia. Now, and remember, FBI Director Jim Comey and Special Counsel Bob Mueller, they investigated this Russian hoax for 2 or 3 years, and they specifically investigated Donald Trump Jr. We're getting back to the George Stephanopoulos Donald Trump interview that occurred in the Oval Office a few days ago that has created a national media sensation. Bob Mueller, FBI Director Comey, they investigated Trump Jr. specifically for the Trump Tower meeting. They reviewed the emails in question. They interviewed those involved, including Trump Jr. And neither FBI Director Jim Comey or Special Counsel Bob Mueller brought charges against Donald Trump Jr. And it's not like the Special Counsel didn't have sufficient evidence, didn't have sufficient information. We won't call it evidence because it turns out there was no crime. He had all the information he needed. He had the email string, which contained the offer from the foreign national. I'm offering to give you this information from the Russian prosecutor about bad things that Hillary Clinton did. It's in writing. Mueller had the email. He interviewed Trump Jr. and the rest, but he didn't file charges. And Bob Mueller says in his report, and really it's barely even covered. And in fact, I've been covering this darn Russian hoax, this collusion, this fake collusion, and this bogus Mueller investigation ever since it started, and the Comey investigation that came before it. For 2.5 or 3 years now, I've written how many op-eds about it. I was unaware that Mueller put in his report, no judicial decision has treated the voluntary provision of uncompensated opposition research or similar information as a thing of value that could amount to a contribution under campaign finance law. Mueller goes on to reference that such a prohibition may violate the First Amendment right to free speech. He expressed concern about federal election law being used to prohibit individuals, even foreign nationals, from simply recounting or relaying historically accurate facts. So Mueller looked at this. He looked closely at this. He looked at this thing of value, part of the federal election statute that Democrats and liberals are saying Trump Jr. violated, and Stephanopoulos insinuating Trump Jr. violated. Mueller said no, there's no there. There's no crime. And even if Oppo research was a thing of value, we really can't prosecute it because it violates the First Amendment. That's the Mueller report. How many of you were aware of that? Art, were you aware of that? Art wasn't aware of that. That's surprising because he knows so much about so many things. Anyway, we're talking about the big interview between George Stephanopoulos and President Donald J. Trump that has really caused a sensation around the country. Media talking heads are agag, and they believe they've caught the president in admitting that he will commit a future crime. More about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And boy, we've got a hot one, a hot political and legal issue. And we're talking about the politics involved in the interview between George Stephanopoulos of ABC News and President Trump. And we're focused more on the law right now. We'll try to talk about the politics in a little bit in the time we have remaining before we come to the sorry conclusion of the Marc Scaringi Show on this Father's Day weekend, as I congratulate and thank and show my appreciation for all the fathers out there for doing all the hard work they do, trying to keep their children in line and well-behaved and studying hard and working hard and playing hard. We try every day to do our fatherly duties, and I will soon be shipping out. As soon as we're done with the show, I'll be in the family minivan on the way down 81 to Dollywood in the Great Smoky Mountains, and they are calling, and she is calling. We'll talk more about her maybe in the next show, but we're looking forward to our family vacation down to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And hopefully we won't be attacked by any bears. In fact, where we're staying, and I'm trying to be a little bit more interesting because the management at WHP 580 wants me to be a little more interesting, a little more theatrical, and I'll try to do some of my theatrics in a little bit here. They say that Rush Limbaugh shuffles papers while he does his show. So, Art, if you can get the sound of the paper shuffling, if you can zero the microphone into that, and here I am shuffling papers. Anyway, where we're staying, it made national news on Fox News. A bear slipped into the hot tub on the back deck of a cabin overlooking Gatlinburg, and we're hoping that that's not the cabin that we've rented and will be staying in. So hopefully our family will be safe from all those bears down there. But we're talking about the bears and the danger lurking in Washington, D.C., where we have the little bear, the bear cub, George Stephanopoulos, going after the president, trying to entrap him and get him to say something incriminating. Stephanopoulos, one who doesn't really know election law at all or that well. The president doing what he does, defending himself, defending his son, and trying to explain how things work in reality. And the president is saying that people approach him all of the time and with information on his candidates and what she's supposed to do. Call the FBI every time someone does. The FBI has more important things to do. And we're talking about something that I was unaware of, notwithstanding all of the work and research that I've done on the Mueller report, that Mueller essentially said, reviewed all the evidence involving the Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr. And remember, that's what Stephanopoulos was asking Trump about during this now infamous Oval Office interview, insinuating that Donald Trump Jr. should have called the FBI to report a crime. It turns out it wasn't a crime. Bob Mueller reviewed the emails, interviewed the individuals involved, including Trump Jr., and concluded there was no crime. So why do his people even allow this? Why do they even allow those questions? Why, the president should have said, no, George, we don't call the FBI to report non-crimes. Can't you get that? Can't you understand that? The whole Comey investigation and Bob Mueller investigation involving this fake Trump-Russian collusion was non-existent. It didn't occur. So, no, we're not going to call the FBI to report on something that's not a crime. That's not what we do here in America. Anyway, interestingly, now the chairman of the FEC and the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, usually really stays out of politics and tries to keep a low profile. But Ellen Weintraub, who's the chairwoman of the FEC, she issued a statement in direct rebuke of President Trump for his comments, his responses that he gave to George Stephanopoulos in the Oval Office about the Donald Trump should he have called the FBI, the Donald Trump Jr. should he have called the FBI issue to report a non-crime. She captions her tweet. This is the FEC, Federal Election Commission Chairwoman, supposed to be impartial, unbiased. She captions her tweet, "I would not have thought I needed to say this." And then she has the statement attached. And in the statement she writes, and I'll just read one or two lines from it. "It's illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a U.S. election. This is not a novel concept." Now, here she is admonishing, she's remonstrating the president for not understanding this not novel concept, that it's illegal for a person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national. Now, toward the end of her statement, she writes, "Any political campaign that receives an offer of a prohibited donation from a foreign source should report that offer to the FBI." So there is the chairwoman of the Federal Election Commission remonstrating, admonishing, correcting Donald Trump Sr. and Donald Trump Jr. The FEC chairwoman, impartial, unbiased, is saying that the president and Trump Jr. are wrong, and they're wrong on this particular issue. Now, if you read her statement closely, she says any political campaign that receives an offer of a prohibited donation from a foreign source should report that to the FBI. Did Donald Trump Jr. receive an offer of a prohibited campaign donation? No, he didn't. He received an offer of information. That's not a donation. They're different things. And this is the duplicity of the FEC chairwoman. admonishing the president and Trump Jr. for not calling the FBI when they hear from a foreigner that there might be information coming their way. She said, no, you have to, you should, if you're receiving an offer of a prohibited donation, when that's not what they received. Now, so does the FEC chairwoman getting herself involved in this tweet, does that clear things up for you? Do you all know now what a thing of value is, which is the critical issue? It's remarkable to me that the FEC chairwoman would interject herself in this debate and correct the president incorrectly for doing something that neither he nor Trump Jr. did, which was receive an offer from a donation from a foreign national, which is obviously a violation of the law. They received something different. An offer, or Trump Jr. did. Trump Sr. didn't receive anything other than a whole lot of a 2-year or 3-year investigation where they were threatening to put him in jail and impeach him. But in any event, donation means money. It's different from opposition research, and the FEC chairwoman, she should have said that. She should have explained that. Or maybe she doesn't understand. Maybe she doesn't know the difference. But she tried to state the obvious, but she did so in such a way that just drew attention to the flaw in the law, and she intentionally, and I believe either intentionally or negligently, mischaracterized the issue as Trump Jr. receiving an offer of a monetary donation from a foreign national, and the issue was not that at all. It was the receiving of the information. So the FEC chairwoman tries to ride to the rescue of George Stephanopoulos, the liberal media, the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi, and all of those calling for Trump's indictment, impeachment, incarceration, his utter destruction, because he told George Stephanopoulos that, maybe you do both. Maybe you read the information, you look at it, and maybe you call the FBI. And we have the FEC now getting involved, stating that the president's wrong, doesn't know the law, when she doesn't know the law. She dodges the fundamental question. The question is information a thing of value? And by the way, answering that question, that would be of great assistance to political candidates, those running for office. It would be nice to know. But she dodges it, and she muddies the waters even more with her attempt to clarify. So then we have other talking heads getting involved, essentially saying that the Trump Jr. committed a crime, an obvious felony. It's absolutely false. We have the Democrat leadership in an uproar. We have Nancy Pelosi stating the president once again has shown he doesn't know right from wrong, which is obviously false, as we've explained. And Nancy Pelosi even accuses the president of the United States of being involved in a criminal cover-up where Bob Mueller found there was no crime. That's the irony of ironies. Well, that's about all the time we have today for the Marc Scaringi Show. I want to thank you for listening. Enjoy your Father's Day.